Story 1. The forest, vast and unforgiving, seemed to echo with a chorus of ancient whispers as I, old Greg, gray-haired and time-worn, ventured deeper into its heart. There's a certain stillness in these woods, one that's unsettling yet familiar, like an uninvited guest who never leaves. 15 years had passed since that fateful night, yet it felt like only yesterday. The memories, sharp as ever, clawed at my soul, refusing to be buried in the sands of time. I remember the night vividly. The air was crisp, the moon a mere sliver in the sky, casting a faint light over the dense canopy. I was out hunting, a routine that once brought me peace, but that night the forest felt different, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something sinister to unfold. And unfold it did, in the most horrific way imaginable. My return home was met with a sight no man should ever witness. The door to my cabin was ajar, creaking softly in the night breeze. Inside, the remnants of my life lay in ruin, torn apart by an entity born from nightmares. It was a werewolf, a creature of dark folklore, yet there it was, as real as the grief that consumed me. My family, my joy, the very essence of my being, all snatched away by this monster of the night. For years I tried to escape the memories, to drown them in the mundane routines of life, but some wounds never heal. They fester, growing into obsessions that consume the soul. The tragedy of that night became my cross to bear, a relentless reminder of what I had lost. Now, as I trudged through the underbrush, each step was a painful echo of the past. I had nothing left but this hunt, this quest for vengeance that had gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I was no longer just a man. I was a hunter of monsters, both real and those that lurked in the shadows of my mind. The forest seemed to watch me, its ancient trees standing like silent sentinels. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig underfoot, heightened my senses. The monster was out there somewhere, biding its time, but I was patient. I had become the embodiment of the hunt, my life dedicated to finding and destroying the creature that had turned my world into an endless night. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor, I paused. The weight of my rifle in my hands was a familiar comfort, a reminder of the purpose that drove me. The werewolf, my nemesis, was more than just a beast. It was the embodiment of the darkness that had swallowed my life. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the forest wash over me. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, both physical and mental, but I was ready. I had to be, for in the depths of these woods lay not just a monster, but the chance for redemption, for peace. And so, with a heart heavy with memories and a resolve as unyielding as the ancient trees around me, I ventured on into the heart of darkness. As I ventured deeper, memories surfaced unbidden, piercing through the veil of time. Once, my home was a haven of laughter and love, a sanctuary where my children's giggles echoed through the halls, and my wife's tender smile was the sun that brightened our days. I can still see them, my little ones, their faces alight with joy, chasing each other in the yard under the benevolent gaze of the summer sun. Their laughter was a melody that filled the air, weaving a tapestry of happiness that seemed unbreakable. And there, amidst that picture of bliss, stood my wife, the cornerstone of our family. Her eyes sparkled with unspoken love as she watched over us, her smile a beacon of warmth in our lives. Our home was more than just walls and a roof. It was a cocoon of peace, a place where the aroma of freshly baked rolls lingered in the air, a testament to my wife's loving hands. Family dinners were a sacred ritual, a time when we came together, savoring each meal as if it were a precious gift. But that idyllic life was shattered, torn asunder by a nightmare made flesh. The werewolf, a dark, malevolent force, invaded our sanctuary, turning our haven into a hellish landscape. I lost them that night, my wife, my children. Their screams, intertwining with the beast's howls, created a symphony of terror that haunts me still. In a blind rage, fueled by despair and heartache, I confronted the monster. I remember the struggle, fierce and brutal. The creature, a towering mass of fur and fangs, was a relentless force. But driven by my agony, I managed to wound it. I took one of its eyes, a small victory in a war I had already lost. I plunged a knife into its belly, feeling its hot blood on my hands. But the beast fought back with equal ferocity, leaving me crippled, my body as broken as my spirit. Neighbors found us later, my lifeless family and I barely clinging to life. The doctors saved me, pulling me back from the brink of death. But what they couldn't heal was the gaping wound in my soul. The months of recovery were a blur, each day a torturous reminder of what I had lost. No medication could numb the pain. No amount of time could erase the scars that marred my heart. And so here I am, in these haunted woods, a man driven by a singular purpose, to avenge my family. The werewolf must pay for what it took from me. Each step I take is a step closer to the monster, a step towards the closure I so desperately seek. I am no longer just a hunter. I am a father and a husband seeking justice in a world that has shown me the cruel face of fate. The werewolf, my nemesis, is out there, and I will find it. I must. Of course, I'd gone to the police many times. I'd told them about that night in great detail, about the way the werewolf's eyes glittered in the dark, about the ferocity of our fight. But my words, filled with truth, fell on ears that were closed to the possibility that such nightmares could be real. The police, men and women bound by logic and reason, could not fathom a world where creatures of folklore roamed. To them, my tale was nothing more than the ramblings of a man broken by loss. They dismissed my pleas, suggesting what I already knew. A wild animal, not a monster of myth, was to blame. Undeterred, I sought understanding elsewhere. I reached out to friends, relatives, and even acquaintances who might harbor a belief in the extraordinary. I spoke to rangers, those familiar with the secrets of the forest, but they all had the same skepticism as the police officers. I saw only distrust and growing weariness about my state of mind in their eyes. I had seen the reflection of doubt, a belief that grief had twisted my reality. My once close friends had begun to drift away, their discomfort evident. Suggestions were made, thinly veiled in concern, that perhaps I needed psychological help, that I should accept the reality of a mere animal attack. The community that had once embraced me now seemed distant, rooted in a fog of misunderstanding. Their evasive glances, their hesitant steps away from me, had spoken louder than words. I was an outcast, a man haunted by a truth that no one else could see. Yet, I knew what I had witnessed. I knew the truth, and I didn't care if they believed me or not. I had to do it myself. There was a werewolf lurking in the depths of the forest, the real killer of my family. Despite the world turning its back on me, I had never ceased in my quest. The woods had become my second home, a vast expanse that I combed through, searching for any sign of the beast. Over 15 long years, I had become as much a part of the forest as the ancient trees and hidden streams. I had studied every inch, every whisper of the wind, every mark on the bark. My days were spent tracking, my nights pondering over maps and notes. piecing together the puzzle that would lead me to my nemesis. There had been encounters, fleeting glimpses of the creature that had shattered my world. Each time, it was a specter on the edge of my vision, a shadow that slipped away just as I reached out. It was as if the werewolf was taunting me, a ghostly presence always one step ahead. In moments of confrontation, when our paths had crossed, I would challenge it, my voice echoing through the trees. "Why do you flee? Why not end this, beast?" My words were a mix of anger and desperation, a challenge to the creature that seemed to fear the finality of our battle. But the werewolf had remained elusive, a phantom that danced on the periphery of my hunt. Its avoidance of a decisive confrontation had only fueled my determination. Was this creature, this harbinger of death, afraid of me? The forest had held its breath with me, a silent companion in my solitary quest. As I lay in my makeshift camp each night, staring into the flames, I pondered this game of cat and mouse. Was the werewolf biding its time, or was there another reason for its evasion? The answer had eluded me, but my resolve never wavered. I would continue this pursuit for as long as my body and spirit could withstand the toll. The werewolf was out there, and our paths would cross again. When they did, I would be ready. This day is special to me. If fate had been kinder, if the darkness had not descended upon my life, today would have been my son's 19th birthday. The thought of it, the wonder of what he might have become, pierces through me like a shard of ice. I can almost see him, a young man with dreams and aspirations, a life full of potential. But those are fantasies, echoes of a life stolen from us. Now there is only the path ahead, the relentless pursuit that consumes my every waking moment. The werewolf, my nemesis, has grown careless in its tracks. Age and time, relentless in their pursuit, spare no one, not even monsters. I have noticed the signs. More wool along its path, an indication of its waning strength. It is old, perhaps sick, a shadow of the fearsome creature it once was. But I am old too, a man whose years weigh heavily upon his shoulders. Yet my resolve remains unshaken, my mind as sharp as it was 15 years ago when this quest began. There is a fire within me, fueled by loss and the unyielding need for justice. Soon, very soon, I will catch up with this monster, and I feel like this day is special, and not just because it's my son's birthday. The forest tonight feels alive with a tense anticipation. The moon, a low-hanging sentinel, casts elongated shadows that dance with the rustling leaves. Each step I take resonates through the woods, a drumbeat heralding the impending confrontation. The night air is thick, laden with a metallic odor that speaks of proximity. The usual sounds of the nocturnal forest have quieted, as if nature itself senses the nearing climax of this long pursuit. My heart beats a frantic rhythm, a mix of fear and anticipation. Memories of that fateful night, which have long haunted me, now fuel my determination. They are no longer chains that bind me to grief, but a catalyst that propels me forward. As I delve deeper into the heart of the woods, the feeling grows stronger. The werewolf is near. I can sense it. The years of tracking, of learning its habits and movements, have led to this moment. Tonight, the moon seems to shine just for me, illuminating a path that has been shrouded in darkness for far too long. The wind whispers secrets, carrying with it the scent of the creature that has been the focus of my existence for over a decade. I move with a purpose that belies my years, my senses heightened to every sound, every movement in the underbrush. The rifle in my hands, a trusted companion through countless nights, feels ready, eager for the encounter that has been building for years. The night is suddenly pierced by a growl in which a primal ferocity could be heard. My fingers tightened around the rifle, a reflex honed by years of anticipation and fear. From the shadows, a figure emerged, immense and terrifying in its presence. The werewolf, a creature of nightmares, stood before me, its eyes alight with a malevolent fire. Time seemed to bend in that moment, stretching into an eternity as we stood there, hunter and hunted, locked in a gaze that spoke of years of pain and vengeance. The werewolf's lips curled into a sinister grin, revealing fangs that glistened like daggers under the moon's cold light. With a speed that belied its size, the creature lunged, its movements a blur, a display of savage grace that was both horrifying and awe-inspiring. I reacted instinctively, the rifle's report thundering through the clearing, a desperate attempt to end the nightmare once and for all. But the werewolf was faster, evading the bullet with an agility that seemed impossible. In the moonlit clearing, our battle unfolded, a dance of life and death that was as old as time itself. Steel met claw, the sound of our struggle a symphony of survival. The creature's breath was hot against my skin, a reminder of the razor-thin line between life and death. Despite the werewolf's formidable strength, I sensed a change. The beast of my memories, the unstoppable force of destruction, was not the same. Age and illness had taken their toll, slowing its movements, dulling its reflexes. This realization ignited a spark of hope within me. The werewolf was vulnerable, and in that vulnerability lay my chance. It was a slim chance, but it was all I needed. My resolve hardened, a determination that had been forged in the fires of loss and grief. I would not falter, not now when the end was within reach. If my bullets failed, my knife would not. And if the knife was lost, I would use my bare hands, my teeth, anything to bring this creature down. Escape was not an option, not for the werewolf, not this time. Our battle raged on, a clash of wills as much as strength. Every blow I landed was a tribute to those I had lost, a silent scream for justice that echoed in the night. The werewolf fought with a desperation that matched my own, a creature cornered with nowhere left to run. I could feel the toll the fight was taking on my body, each movement a testament to the years and the burdens they carried. But I pushed through the pain, driven by a single unyielding thought. This ends tonight. Despite the werewolf's debilitating sickness, its power remained formidable. It hurled me aside with a force that belied its weakened state, and I crashed into the underbrush, a tangle of pain and broken resolve. My body screamed in agony from the impact. I could feel the sharp, jarring pain of fractured ribs. My clothes were tattered and soaked with blood. Lying there gasping for breath, a part of me acknowledged the gravity of my injuries. Yet surrender was not a word that found refuge in my heart. With a Herculean effort, I forced myself upright, meeting the werewolf's gaze with an unbroken spirit. There was more than just physical pain. There was a fire within me, a flame that refused to be extinguished. The werewolf circled me, a predator assessing its prey, its growls reverberating through the clearing. I knew I could not match its brute strength, but what I possessed was something far more potent, an unyielding will tempered in the crucible of loss and suffering. And I was cunning, armed with a knife dipped in poison, a silent accomplice to my desperation. As the werewolf lunged again, I braced for the impact. Its paws struck with a force that sent me hurtling against a tree, the collision tearing open my chest, a warm rush of blood following the searing pain. I was on the brink, teetering on the edge of consciousness, but my resolve did not waver. The beast approached, sensing my vulnerability. It saw me struggling for breath, lying broken and defenseless. But within that broken body lay a mind that was sharp, a spirit that was cunning. As it made its final lunge, I shifted with the last ounce of my strength, evading its deadly jaws and driving the silver blade deep into its side. A guttural howl shattered the night, a sound that was both triumphant and tragic. The werewolf staggered back, blood oozing from the wound, painting the forest floor a dark crimson. This was the moment, the turning point in our deadly waltz. I gathered every fragment of strength that remained, preparing for the final act of this long and torturous drama. The werewolf, though weakened, was far from defeated. It lunged with a desperation born of survival, its jaws clamping down on my forearm. Agony lanced through my body, but I did not yield to it. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I thrust the blade with all my might, driving it into the creature's heart. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the werewolf's body shuddered, its life force ebbing away. I watched, my own body teetering on the brink of collapse, as the beast that had haunted my every waking moment began to falter. In that instant, time slowed, each second stretching into an eternity. The werewolf's eyes, once glowing with malice, now dimmed with the realization of its fate. And in those eyes I saw something that transcended the boundary between man and beast, a shared understanding of pain, loss, and the inevitable end that awaits us all. Lying there in the embrace of the forest that had witnessed our final struggle, I watched as the werewolf's life ebbed away. The beast, once a symbol of my nightmares, now lay defeated, a silver knife protruding from its heart. Its breathing was labored, each gasp a feeble protest against the inevitable end. In those moments, a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. There was resentment for the years of torment, the loss that had hollowed out my life. There was anger, a burning fury that had fueled my relentless pursuit. But there was also triumph, a bitter realization that my quest was at its end. And amidst these swirling emotions, there was devastation, a profound sense of emptiness at the culmination of my long-held purpose. But there remained one question that had haunted me for years, and it made its way to my lips in a whisper in the silence of dawn. Why? Why did you attack my family? Why did you do this? The werewolf, with its last remnants of life, turned to look at me. Even in its final moments, there was a storm of emotions in its eyes. It was old, sick, its once fearsome form now marred by the battles it had fought. One eye was missing, a testament to our first encounter, a memory etched in pain and loss. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken stories, the werewolf spoke in a guttural, haunting voice. "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You killed my wolf cubs, Hunter. I had my revenge." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. My pursuit, my quest for vengeance, had been born from a cycle of retribution. The lines between hunter and hunted, between man and beast, blurred in the cruel irony of fate. As the werewolf's voice faded, so too did the light in its eyes. The life that had once burned fiercely within it slowly extinguished, leaving behind a stillness that was both eerie and profound. Story 2. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was settled into the ranger station, an old wooden structure nestled among the dense greenery of North Carolina's woods. The sun slanted through the gaps in the heavy canopy, the uneven spots of light dancing on the worn oak desk in front of me. The faint lingering scent of damp moss clung to the walls, painting an unshakable image of the wild, unyielding nature that lay beyond. I gazed out of the window. The sight of towering trees, a sea of green and brown extending as far as the eye could see, always filled me with a quiet dread. a trepidation that bore the weight of secrets concealed within the profound depths of the forest. Its silent watchfulness echoed in the hushed whispers of the leaves. The crackle of my walkie-talkie interrupted my musings. "Ranger Hawkins, do you copy? Over." I snatched the device from its holster, holding the button down as I responded. "This is Hawkins. Go ahead. Over. 10 hikers have gone missing. We need you to join the search party. Over." My heart skipped a beat. Missing? Any leads on their last location? Last known coordinates point towards the Northern Mountain Trail. Over. The Northern Mountain Trail, a rugged, challenging trek that would test even the most experienced hiker. I remembered them now, a group of spirited college students who had stopped by the ranger station a week ago, their laughter echoing through the room, faces flushed with excitement and naivety. 10 of them, bright and beaming, filled with youthful bravado and an eagerness to conquer the wilderness. "All right," I said, trying to shake off the unsettling sensation crawling up my spine. "I'll gear up and head out. Over and out." I pushed back my chair, my worn-out boots thudding against the wooden floors. I paced across the room. The gear hung on the back wall, clean and organized. My headlamp, knife, extra batteries, first aid kit, compass, water purifier, map, and more essentials for navigating the treacherous terrain of the forest. As I gathered the gear, my mind drifted back to the group of hikers. They were so young, full of life and the promise of adventure, the glint of anticipation in their eyes. Yet here I was, tasked with finding them in the belly of this beast we called home. The memories of past search and rescue missions flooded back. Faces of the missing etched in my mind. Their smiles faded into fear and regret. The forest could be merciless, unforgiving, swallowing the unwary in its endless green abyss. Its alluring beauty hid its dangers well, and those who underestimated it often paid the highest price. Securing my gear, I picked up the walkie-talkie once more. "Ranger Hughes, this is Hawkins. I'm heading out. Over." "Copy that, Hawkins. Be careful out there. Over and out." I stepped out of the station, the scent of wet earth filling my nostrils, the chorus of the wilderness resonating in my ears. I started towards the Northern Trail, my heart echoing with silent prayers for those lost souls, hoping that this time we weren't too late. As I approached the rendezvous point, I spotted the familiar figures of my colleagues, strong, seasoned men accustomed to the forest's temperament. They bore the same expression of solemnity that I felt. We exchanged terse greetings, our usual camaraderie muted by the gravity of our mission. "Hawkins," Tom, a grizzled veteran with a peppered beard, said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet forest. "Got here fast." "Can't waste time," I replied, meeting his gaze. The others, Brad, Alan, and Ricky, nodded in agreement, their faces grim. We moved in a single file, our steps muted on the soft forest floor. Tom led the way, the map rustling in his grip as he traced the hiker's path. We moved through the thick undergrowth, the morning mist swirling around us, wrapping the forest in an ethereal shroud. It was eerily silent. The usual buzz of the forest quietened as if it too was holding its breath. We continued our search, the only sound being the rustling of leaves under our boots, the occasional crackle from the walkie-talkie, and our rhythmic breathing. After hours of tracking, we found something, a trail that veered from the main path. The oddity was instantly alarming. It led into one of the less explored parts of the forest, an area filled with treacherous terrain and thick foliage. "They left the trail," Brad murmured, squinting at the faint footprints on the moist ground. "But why?" We exchanged uneasy glances. Might be they got disoriented or chased by some animal, Alan suggested, his voice hushed. But we know the wildlife here, Alan. They don't chase humans, not unless threatened, Ricky countered. Maybe they decided on a detour, got a thrill from wandering off the beaten track, I added, knowing the allure of such adrenaline-fueled decisions. Yet my gut churned with unease. Into this part of the forest doesn't seem right, Tom muttered, stroking his beard, eyes scanning the treacherous path ahead. We stood at the edge of the unfamiliar, gazing into the dense undergrowth. The towering trees stretched into the cloud-filled sky, the lower branches laden with moss and creepers. Their trunks were so wide that it would take several men to encircle them. The forest was darker here, sunlight unable to penetrate the thick leafy canopy. A cool wind blew, rustling the leaves, the sound a low whisper among the trees. This is a death wish, and they knew that. The briefing was clear, Brad murmured, unease creeping into his voice. No use speculating. We need to find them, Tom decided. We nodded, each of us carrying our own apprehensions as we embarked on the divergent path the hikers had taken. We trudged on, the weight of the foreboding forest bearing down on us. As we penetrated deeper into the wilderness, the feeling of unease deepened, an intangible chill creeping along our spines. The forest grew denser, the shadows darker, the silence heavier. The air around us was thick with tension, a stillness that almost seemed unnatural. Through the dense undergrowth, we caught a glimpse of something odd, the remains of a camp. We quickened our pace, hearts pounding in our chests. My breath hitched as we drew nearer. On the grass, under the indifferent gaze of the colossal trees, lay a body. A young man sprawled on the dew-dampened grass, his body contorted unnaturally. His eyes were wide open, a look of horror etched onto his face, as though he had seen his worst nightmare come alive. His limbs were spread out as though he had tried to escape something, and his final moments were spent in terror. I approached the body, my heart pounding. Brad joined me, his usual vibrant eyes now clouded with dread. Cautiously, he pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck, looking for any sign of life. There was none. The guy was dead. A cold shiver ran down my spine, a wave of terror washing over me. We were all silent, a sense of dread wrapping around us like a shroud. Rousing ourselves, we proceeded to the camp. The scene before us was chilling. A single tent stood in a small clearing, its entrance gaping open like a silent scream. The remains of a campfire lay nearby, the ashes cold and gray. God, what happened here? Ricky muttered, his voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, unanswered. We shared a collective apprehension. This was unlike anything we had ever seen before. Then Alan, who had ventured into the tent, called out in a strangled voice. Guys. His voice drew us towards the tent. Inside, we found another body, a young woman this time. She too wore an expression of sheer terror, her arms curled around herself as though she were trying to protect herself from something monstrous. Her death was as disturbing and mysterious as the young man's. Horror coursed through us. These weren't just unfortunate accidents. This was something sinister, something terrifying. The silence of the forest was deafening, the forest's many eyes watching our every move. The twisted faces of the hikers haunted our thoughts, each of us wondering the same dreadful thought. What unspeakable terror had they faced in their final moments? We stared at each other in stunned silence, the bodies in front of us chilling reminders of the hidden terrors that the forest held. Taking a deep breath, I reached for my walkie-talkie. This is Hawkins. We need backup and forensic support at our coordinates. "We found bodies," I choked out, my voice echoing in the silence. "Copy, Hawkins. We're sending a team right away," came the static-filled reply. With the call made, we set about the grim task of searching for survivors. The search was eerily quiet, only the sound of rustling leaves and the hushed whispers of the forest accompanying us. But there was nothing. No sign of the other hikers, no clue as to what had happened. Then a blood-curdling scream tore through the silence, making our hearts pound in our chests. It was Tom. We rushed towards him, our hearts hammering in our throats. As we approached, we saw him standing rigid, his eyes wide with terror, looking up. Confused, we followed his gaze. My breath hitched as I saw another body, this time in the gnarled branches of an ancient tree. A young man, his arms tightly wrapped around a thick branch, his body frozen in a terrifying climb for escape. His face, too, bore the same mask of horror we had seen on the others. He was caught in a moment of unimaginable fear, his eyes wide and empty, his mouth opened in a silent scream. He had died attempting to escape from something that had terrified him to his very core. Shock washed over us, an icy wave of dread that left us numb. Our eyes remained glued to the gruesome sight above, the stark horror of the scene rendering us speechless. What had driven these hikers to such desperate ends? What terror had pursued them, turning their adventure into a nightmare? A sense of foreboding clung to us as we resumed our search, the chilling discoveries echoing in our minds. The once comforting whispers of the forest now seemed menacing, the towering trees intimidating sentinels hiding an unspeakable horror. We continued our search, the memory of the horrific discoveries haunting our every step. The forest seemed to close in on us, the gloomy undergrowth a maze of unseen terrors. As we ventured further, a gruesome sight greeted us at the bottom of a steep cliff. 2 more bodies lay twisted and broken, evidence of a fatal fall. Like the others, they bore expressions of stark terror, their eyes wide, their bodies stiff. It seemed they had jumped in a desperate attempt to escape whatever had been pursuing them. A hollow feeling of dread settled in my gut as we noted the absence of 2 more hikers. Despite our most thorough efforts, we found no trace of them. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Soon, the sound of helicopters filled the air, breaking the haunting silence of the forest. The backup team had arrived, their grim faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. Despite their assistance and the thorough combing of the forest, the missing students were never found. The horrifying incident was soon plastered all over the news, turning the tranquil forest into a place of morbid curiosity. The inexplicable deaths of the hikers became a magnet for thrill seekers, paranormal investigators, and conspiracy theorists alike. For them, it was a mystery to be solved, a tantalizing enigma to be dissected and theorized over. But for me, it was a chilling reminder of the unseen horrors that the forest can harbor. The memory of those terrified faces, their eyes wide with horror, their desperate attempts to escape. It was a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was left with more questions than answers and a creeping sense of dread that would forever lurk at the back of my mind, a grim souvenir from the darkest day of my career. Story 3. I've been out of the Ranger Service for 2 years now. Retirement, they call it. A chance to rest the old bones, to stoke the fire in the hearth. Not a campfire under the open stars, surrounded by the comforts of home, my family close by. The grandchildren, rapt with attention, huddle closer to the fireside. I find my eyes drawn to the flickering flames, my mind lost in the memories they conjure. "Grandpa Carl, tell us a story," my youngest grandchild Lily implores, her wide, innocent eyes sparkling in the firelight. A chuckle escapes my lips. "You want to hear about the time your old grandpa used to work the wilds as a ranger, huh?" I ask, knowing the answer. I can see their eager nods, feel their anticipation. I gaze into the fire as the flames dance and the shadows they cast become the trees and creatures of the forest in my mind. "You know, kids," I start, "every forest in this world is a living organism. It's got its own character, its own mood. Sometimes it welcomes you, wraps you in its peace and beauty. Other times it bares its teeth, brings danger, reminds you that you're a guest in its vast wilderness. I see them hanging onto my words, their young minds absorbing, understanding. I was a young man, green as the summer leaves, when I started as an assistant chief ranger in the national park, I recall, a wistful smile crossing my weathered face. I saw many things in those years, both good and bad. It was a calling, not just a job. But one thing, one event from those days, still chills my blood. I pause, glancing around at the faces surrounding me. They're captivated, hushed, waiting for me to reveal the mystery. I let the silence build a moment longer, then continue. It was mid-July, hot as a firecracker, I remember. I was still fresh, maybe a bit overeager, wanting to make a difference, wanting to protect my forest. I inhale the scent of the burning wood, bringing back the memory even stronger. That's when it happened. "And what happened, Grandpa?" My eldest grandson Ben asks, leaning forward, his curiosity piqued. I cast my gaze to the crackling fire again. A log collapses in the fireplace, throwing up a swarm of sparks. A knot tightens in my chest as I remember. I take a deep breath, steeling myself to delve back into the shadows of the past. I know this is just the beginning, the opening of the gates to a memory long held in the abyss of time. "Let's take it slow, kids," I say, a wistful sigh escaping my lips. It's a story that needs its time. I know they are ready for the story, but I also know they are not ready for the darkness it holds. And as I sit there, ready to venture back into the shadowed woods of the past, I realize that perhaps I am not ready either. Those early days in the national park were filled with peace and monotony, a stark contrast to the image I had of an adventurous ranger life. But I was content, ready to learn from my more experienced colleagues. They were good men, grizzled veterans of the wilderness, who welcomed me into their fold, taught me the tricks of the trade, helped me find my footing in the untamed wilderness we were tasked with protecting. Months flew by, and I became more comfortable in my role, more confident in my strides as I patrolled the forest. But as they say, overconfidence can be a dangerous thing. It was on one of these overconfident days, 3 months into my tenure, that I ventured too deep into the woods. I remember it like it was yesterday. The air was heavy with the musk of damp earth, the trees towering above me like ancient guardians. I was alone, the usually comforting silence of the forest suddenly eerie and unsettling. And then I saw it, nestled between towering oaks and shrouded in thick undergrowth, a small hill crowned by a cave. I stood there, a young ranger, facing the mouth of the unknown, a primal pull tugging at me, coaxing me to step closer. I remember the strange attraction, the way the dark void of the cave beckoned me. I could almost hear it whispering my name, but I understood the dangers it could hold. It could be a den of a predatory animal, a shelter to unknown threats. It took every ounce of my willpower to turn back, to leave the mystery of the cave unexplored. Back at the ranger hut, I recounted my discovery to my colleagues. The reaction was nothing I had expected. The jovial atmosphere was replaced by a heavy silence, their faces hardening as I described the cave. Bari, a senior ranger, a man of few words, was the most perturbed. He shot up from his chair, his gruff voice demanding, Did you see any warning signs, Carl? Did you see anything that said you shouldn't be there? I was taken aback by his agitation. No, I answered truthfully. There weren't any signs. Bari's bushy eyebrows furrowed in worry. He paced the room, running his hands through his thinning hair. Finally, he turned to me, his stern gaze drilling into mine. Listen here, boy. You're never to go near that cave again. Do you understand? That part of the forest is strictly forbidden. It's dangerous. But why? I pressed, the mystery of the cave piquing my curiosity even more. Bari sighed, a look of deep sorrow clouding his face. That cave, he began, has been here for centuries. No one knows how deep it goes or what lives within it. All we know is that whoever enters never returns. Man, beast, bird. None who venture in ever come out. The revelation sent chills down my spine, the mysterious cave now tainted with a sinister hue. Avoid that part of the forest, Carl. We've lost good men to that damned cave, he added, his voice barely a whisper. The warning stayed with me, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the forest. I heeded Bari's advice and never ventured into the forbidden part of the forest. I was a ranger, tasked with safeguarding the wilderness, not awakening the unknown. I kept my distance from the cave, respected the boundary drawn by the forest itself. For years, life continued, tranquil and undisturbed, the forest becoming a second home, my guardian and guide. Time, as it tends to do, swept forward, bringing with it changes that even the stoic forest couldn't resist. The young ranger who once explored the park with awe and trepidation had matured into a seasoned man, entrusted with the responsibility of safeguarding the wilderness I had come to call my home. With Bari's retirement, I stepped into the shoes of the senior ranger, a role that brought its own challenges. The entire park, including the forbidden part of the forest, fell under my watchful gaze. I was to ensure the safety of hikers and animals alike, and most importantly, keep everyone away from that god-forsaken cave. I made sure the warning signs were never out of sight, the trails leading away from the perilous part of the forest. I even shared the chilling tale of the cave with every new ranger, a cautionary tale to keep them vigilant and safe. One such ranger was Steve, a lively young man with sparkling eyes and an insatiable curiosity. I took him under my wing, shared the wisdom I had accumulated over the years, warned him about the cave, its mysteries and dangers. And then one ordinary day turned into a nightmare. A frantic voice crackled over the radio, announcing that several hikers, along with Steve, had gone missing. My heart sank. The last reported location was dangerously close to the forbidden zone. The anger that boiled within me was as much directed at myself as it was at Steve. I had trusted him, believed that he had understood the danger. But anger wouldn't find them. Anger wouldn't help them. I needed to act, and act fast. Gathering my gear, I steeled myself for the treacherous path I was about to tread. I was venturing into the forbidden part of the forest, an area I had deliberately avoided for years. The moment I crossed the invisible boundary into the forbidden zone, I felt it. A shift in the air, a tangible heaviness that weighed on my shoulders, a silence that hummed with unsaid warnings, a dread that coiled around my heart. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, watching me with unseen eyes. My experienced gaze combed the surroundings, looking for any signs of the missing group. I had a strange sense of déjà vu, the young ranger in me recognizing the unfamiliarity, the dread. But I was not that young ranger anymore. I was the guardian of the forest, and I had a duty to fulfill. Soon I came upon their camp. The abandoned tents flapped in the icy wind, their belongings scattered in disarray. The eerie silence was broken by the rustling of leaves. A wave of unease washed over me. Something had spooked them, something more terrifying than just a beast of the forest. I could feel it in my bones, a cold dread seeping into me. The campsite was too close to the cave, too close for comfort. I found myself drawn towards the dark void of the cave. A familiar dread knotting in my stomach. A part of me wished I could turn back, retreat to the safety of the known. But the ranger in me, the man who had pledged to protect, knew there was only one way forward. With every step, the cave loomed larger, the air grew heavier, the silence deepened. My heart pounded in my chest, a throbbing rhythm of fear and resolve. My eyes roved around the abandoned campsite, looking for signs of a struggle, of any clues about what might have happened. That's when I heard it, a rustling in the underbrush, a sound that set my heart pounding, my senses on high alert. Shadows danced between the trees, the chilling wind whispering secrets into the rustling leaves. Then, out of the gloom, a figure burst out, almost knocking me off my feet. A woman, her hair wild, eyes wide with terror, she stumbled, collapsing at my feet, her breath coming out in ragged gasps. I crouched down beside her, trying to soothe her panicked breathing. Slowly, her gasps subsided, and she began to come around, her terror-stricken eyes finally focusing on me. "What's your name? Where are the others?" I questioned, hoping to get some answers. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Emily. I'm Emily. We were reporters. We were doing a story on the cave, heard about its secrets. Steve, he guided us here." I could feel my heart sinking with every word she spoke. They had knowingly ventured into the forbidden part of the forest, lured by the allure of the cave's ominous mystery. Emily continued her tale, her voice barely above a whisper. They had started filming near the cave. Then something unexplainable happened. A strange, irresistible pull seemed to draw them towards the cave. Emily had somehow managed to resist, halting at the mouth of the cave while the others were drawn into the abyss. The account of her waiting by the cave chilled me to the core. Her voice shook as she described the screams, the pleas for help that echoed from within. Her friends, Steve, all swallowed by the darkness of the cave. And then there was Steve, pale as a ghost, eyes void of life, beckoning Emily to join him in the cave, his call compelling her, pulling her towards the abyss. She had barely managed to resist, to turn around and run. The fear in Emily's eyes was palpable as she pleaded with me to rescue her colleagues, including Steve. She believed that they were still alive, that there was still a chance to save them. The desperation in her voice, the hope in her eyes, it reminded me of the young ranger I once was. As Emily finished her chilling tale, I couldn't shake off the dread sinking into my gut. I knew the cave's reputation, but hearing her story, it was something else entirely. Despite Emily's pleas, I decided against venturing into the cave immediately. Instead, we returned to the ranger cabin, where I promptly dialed the sheriff, recounting our discovery and Emily's terrifying experience. The dawn found us in the company of the sheriff and a specialist he had brought along. A tiny drone with a remote control and a live camera feed was their answer to our predicament. Emily, still shaken, was left back at the cabin. She needed time to gather herself after her ordeal. Several tense hours later, the drone was all set for its journey into the abyss, while the sheriff, the specialist, and I watched from a safe distance. Our eyes were glued to the screen as the drone began its descent, its light piercing the darkness, revealing nothing but the gnarled, wet rocks of the cave initially. Suddenly, shadows darted across the feed. Something white flickered briefly within the frame, making my heart skip a beat. The enigma deepened when the drone revealed an abandoned camera and a pair of boots, the operator's gear. However, just as we began to explore further, the specialist announced the onset of severe signal interference. We risked losing the drone, an expensive piece of equipment if we pushed any further. After a quick discussion, we agreed to retrieve the abandoned camera before retreating. As the drone's mechanical claws lifted the camera, the feed grew erratic. The drone started to pull back, but it was then that the unthinkable happened. The drone, as if held by some unseen adversary, stopped abruptly and began inching back into the cave. The screen filled with static, and before our very eyes the drone was dragged deeper into the cave. The camera slipped from its grasp and clattered onto the rocky floor. Instinct took over. Ignoring the cold tendrils of fear creeping up my spine, I rushed to grab the fallen camera. I had barely cleared the mouth of the cave when a guttural growl echoed behind me. I didn't look back. The sheriff, the specialist, and I returned to the cabin, our minds reeling with the eerie events. We were out of options, out of ideas. The cave was alive, dangerous. But as I clutched the retrieved camera, I held on to the sliver of hope it offered. As we sat down at the cabin, the retrieved camera's footage played out, unveiling a whole new level of horror. The girl from earlier, Emily, appeared on screen. At first, she seemed to be narrating something about the cave, but then abruptly stopped, her words replaced by a silence that was deafening. Her silence spread, infecting Steve and the other reporter. They all stood frozen like wax figures, breathless and vacant. After a few seconds, they started moving in unison towards the cave, their steps slow and mechanical, like marionettes being controlled by an unseen puppeteer. The cameraman, his own movements mimicking the others, continued to film. Emily, followed by the reporter led by Steve, walked in a single file into the gaping mouth of the cave. The cameraman brought up the rear, his camera the only source of light illuminating their descent into darkness. Through the drone footage, I had already sensed an unnaturalness about the cave. Now, viewing it through the lens of the abandoned camera, I was certain. It looked less like a cave and more like an abandoned mine. The walls, the ground, everything bore signs of being man-made. Suddenly, the camera captured something that chilled me to my bones, literally. Human and animal bones, discarded carelessly, littered the floor of the cave. The sight was grotesque enough, but it was what happened next that imprinted a permanent scar on my soul. White shadows flickered into view. Human-like figures with unnaturally pale skin moved slowly towards the group. One of them approached Steve, extending a hand that he took without protest. The figure led him away, disappearing into the darkness. One by one, the others followed suit. The reporter, Emily. All of them led away by these haunting figures. Finally, it was the cameraman's turn. Through his camera, we had our first close-up look at these creatures. The light from the camera revealed an almost translucent skin, through which a network of blue veins could be seen. The face, if it could be called that, was dominated by two black lifeless eyes and a round mouth lined with sharp, fish-like teeth. A low purring sound filled the hut as it reached out for the cameraman. The camera fell from the cameraman's grasp as he was led away. The last image that the camera captured was a pair of feet disappearing into the dark. Closing the camera, I placed it back in its case. The feeling of unease had morphed into a heavy dread, weighing my thoughts. I was consumed by a single question. How did Emily escape? With the image of her frantic escape and her story ringing in my ears, I raced to the room where I had left her earlier. I was met with an empty space. Her presence evaporated as though it never existed. My heart pounded with a new fear. I hurried back to the sheriff. my words tumbling over each other as I explained Emily's disappearance. To my surprise, the sheriff didn't seem taken aback. In fact, he seemed to dismiss my claims, asserting that when he had arrived that morning, there had been no girl. There was only me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. If he hadn't seen Emily, then what had I witnessed? Who was she? Was it all a trick of the mind, or was it something more sinister? The uncertainty spun a web of fear, a fear that haunted me for years to come. Life eventually moved on, though the shadows of that event lurked in the corners of my mind. I transferred to another park, taking with me the scars of a past that refused to fade away. The whispers of the cave remained just that, whispers. They echoed through the years, a chilling reminder of an enigma that had become my burden to bear.